My name is Misty, and at 67 years old, I never expected to be defending my parenting at Sunday brunch. I raised my daughter Sophia alone after her father walked out when she was just 3. Despite our complicated relationship, I always loved her fiercely. That day when she screamed that I had ruined her life, something inside me finally broke. I reached for the photo album I had kept all these years. Before I tell you what happened that Sunday morning, let me know where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you will want to stick around for what comes next. Life as a single mother was never the path I had planned. At 26, I found myself alone with a 3-year-old daughter after my husband Jack decided family life was too constraining for his ambitions. He packed his bags one Tuesday morning, kissed Sophia on the forehead, and walked out of our lives with barely an explanation. The divorce papers arrived 2 weeks later, along with his request to minimize child support payments due to his uncertain financial future. I was a registered nurse with only 3 years of experience at that point. The hospital paid decently, but not enough to cover rent, childcare, groceries, and all the unexpected expenses that come with raising a child in Seattle. I picked up night shifts at a nursing home and weekend hours at a clinic just to make ends meet. My mother helped when she could, but she lived 3 hours away and had her own health problems. Those early years with Sophia were a mix of exhaustion and joy. I remember her toddler giggles when I would read her bedtime stories, doing all the funny voices despite being dead on my feet after a 12-hour shift. She was such a loving child then, always ready with a hug and sweetly drawn crayon pictures that covered our refrigerator. "This is you and me, Mommy," she would explain, pointing to the stick figures holding hands. "We are happy." And we were mostly. But there were signs even then that would foreshadow our future struggles. When Sophia started elementary school, I noticed her growing awareness of what other kids had that she did not. After her first playdate at Amanda Goldstein's house, she came home demanding to know why we lived in a small apartment instead of a real house with stairs like Amanda. When her 7th birthday approached, she did not want the homemade cake. I had always made her, but insisted on an expensive bakery creation like her friend Zoe had. I tried to explain our financial situation in age-appropriate ways. We have enough for what we need, Sophia, but we have to be careful about extra things. She would pout, arms crossed tightly against her chest. "It's not fair. Dad would buy it for me if he was here." Jack reappeared occasionally in those years, showing up for a birthday with an extravagant gift before disappearing for another 6 months. Each visit left Sophia confused, and me picking up the emotional pieces when he inevitably failed to call when promised. By the time she was 9, his visits had stopped completely, though child support checks still arrived sporadically. Dating was something I put aside. A few coworkers tried to set me up, but between multiple jobs and parenting, I had no energy left for romance. My one attempt at a relationship when Sophia was 10 ended when she deliberately spilled juice on his laptop during the 3rd time he came over for dinner. "I do not want another dad," she declared, firmly afterward. The piano lessons I had once loved became a distant memory. The book club I had joined right before getting pregnant never saw me return. Every spare moment and dollar went to ensuring Sophia had opportunities. I thought she needed swim lessons, science camp, new clothes for school, a tutor when she struggled with math. As Sophia entered middle school, I noticed a growing resentment despite everything I tried to provide. When I could not attend a mother-daughter event because I was covering an emergency hospital shift, she did not speak to me for 3 days. Every other mother was there, she accused, as if my absence was a choice rather than necessity. I maintained boundaries where I could. When she wanted a $100 pair of jeans in 7th grade, I refused. "We do not spend that kind of money on clothes you will outgrow in 6 months," I explained. She responded by not eating dinner for 2 nights. I held firm even as it broke my heart to see her push her plate away. During those preteen years, I started the photo album. It began as a simple way to preserve memories, Sophia. Winning the spelling bee in 4th grade, us at the community pool during rare days off, her proud smile when she mastered riding a bike without training wheels. Later it would become something else entirely, but I did not know that then. I just wanted to hold on to the good moments as I felt her slipping away from me emotionally. I still remember tucking her in at night, even as she began to protest that she was too old for it. "I love you to the moon and back," I would say, our old familiar phrase. Increasingly, she would respond with only silence, turning to face the wall until I quietly closed her bedroom door. The teenage years hit our household like a hurricane. Sophia, at 14, became almost unrecognizable, transforming from an occasionally difficult child to someone who seemed to actively despise everything about me and our life together. The morning battles over appropriate clothing, the rolled eyes when I asked about homework, the constant sighs when I requested simple household help, all became the soundtrack of our days. "You are so controlling" became her favorite accusation whenever I set any boundary. When I insisted on knowing where she was going and who she would be with, she claimed none of her friends had such unreasonable parents. When I required her home by 10 on weeknights, I was apparently ruining her social life completely. Each conversation felt like navigating a minefield of teenage emotions. One incident from her sophomore year stands out painfully clear. After noticing Sophia had been skipping lunch periods according to her school attendance record, I confronted her with my concerns. "Are you having trouble in the cafeteria? Is someone bothering you?" I asked, genuinely worried about bullying or social issues. Her response stunned me. "I am saving up for Coachella tickets," she snapped. "Tara and Jasmine are going, and their parents already said yes. I need $500, and I know you will just say we cannot afford it." When I explained that missing meals was not an acceptable way to save money and that a music festival across the country was indeed beyond our budget, for a 16-year-old, she slammed her bedroom door so hard that the family photo in the prostrate hallway crashed to the floor glass, shattering across the hardwood. Her 16th birthday that year became another battlefield. I had saved carefully for months to buy materials for a handmade scrapbook documenting her life, along with a simple silver bracelet I found on sale. I spent weeks working on that scrapbook during lunch breaks and late nights, including photos, ticket stubs, and mementos from throughout her childhood. When she opened it at breakfast on her birthday, her face fell immediately. "This is what you got me. Old pictures in a book anyone could make." "I thought you would appreciate the memories," I said, trying to hide my hurt. "And there is the bracelet, too." She glanced at the jewelry box without opening it. "Brittany got a car for her 16th. Madison got a MacBook Pro." The scrapbook was pushed aside, never to be opened again. I found it weeks later, shoved under her bed while vacuuming. Despite these painful moments, I remained committed to supporting her education. When college application season arrived during her senior year, I took extra shifts to pay for application fees to 7 universities. We spent evenings at the kitchen table reviewing essay drafts, researching scholarship opportunities, and calculating potential costs. Sophia set her heart on Preston University, a prestigious private school with an exceptional marketing program, but an equally exceptional tuition price tag. When her acceptance letter arrived, her excitement was contagious, but the financial reality was sobering. Even with her partial academic scholarship, we were looking at nearly $30,000 per year. "This is my dream school, Mom," she said, her eyes filled with a genuine passion I had not seen in years. "I have to go here. My whole future depends on it." I refinanced our small condominium, the only real asset I had managed to purchase when Sophia was 12. The new mortgage would take me well into my 70s to pay off, but it provided enough equity to cover the tuition gap. I never told Sophia about this decision, not wanting to burden her with guilt or financial stress as she began this new chapter. The day I dropped her at Preston University was a strange mix of pride and sadness. Her minimal thank you as I helped carry boxes to her dormitory felt insufficient for the financial gymnastics that had made this moment possible, but I told myself her success would be thanks enough. "I expect you to maintain your grades," I said as we parted. "This is a significant investment in your future." She nodded absently, already scanning the hallway for her assigned roommate. "Sure, Mom. I will call you next weekend." That call never came. Instead, a text 3 weeks later informed me she was super busy with orientation activities but doing great. The photo album gained new entries: Sophia in her dormitory, on move-in day, her first collegiate academic award holiday visits, home that grew increasingly brief. For a while I thought college might actually mature her. She seemed more focused during her sophomore and junior years, calling occasionally with excitement about interesting classes or internship opportunities. When she made the dean's list 3 semesters running, I felt a surge of validation for all the sacrifices that had brought us to this point. Maybe the difficult teenage years had just been a necessary phase of separation. I was wrong. The distance had simply allowed her to create a new narrative about her life and our relationship, one I would only discover years later. After graduating with honors from Preston, Sophia landed a position at Meridian Marketing in Chicago, a considerable distance from our Seattle home. At 23, she seemed poised for the success we had both worked toward, though in increasingly different ways. Her starting salary was modest by Chicago standards, but significantly more than I had ever made as a nurse, even after decades of experience. Our phone conversations grew more infrequent and shorter. When we did speak, Sophia focused almost exclusively on work challenges, office politics, and her growing network of professional contacts. Any questions about her personal life were deflected, and inquiries about when she might visit were met with vague references to her busy schedule and limited vacation time. Social media became my primary window into her life. Her Instagram and Facebook pages showed a carefully curated existence: rooftop cocktail parties, weekend getaways, with fashionable friends, expensive restaurant meals, photographed from above. The captions often referenced hustling and making her own way, implying a self-made success story that increasingly erased my contributions. During her 3rd year at Meridian, I flew to Chicago for her 26th birthday, having saved for months to afford the ticket. We had dinner at a restaurant far beyond my usual budget, where Sophia spent much of the evening checking her phone and name-dropping clients. When the check came, she glanced at it briefly before continuing her story about an important upcoming presentation. I paid, of course. Later that weekend, I overheard her on a phone call with a friend while I prepared breakfast in her sleek apartment kitchen. "Yeah, my mom is visiting," she said in a tone, suggesting an obligation rather than a pleasure. "You know how it is with parents who just do not get your life." A pause. "Seriously, I basically came from nothing. She has no idea what it takes to make it in this industry. I had to figure everything out on my own." The spatula froze in my hand. Nothing. All those extra shifts, The second mortgage, the college applications completed together at the kitchen table, the care packages during finals week, reduced to nothing. I finished cooking in silence, contemplating whether to confront her about what I had heard. In the end, I said nothing, telling myself perhaps I had misunderstood the context. 2 years later, at 28, Sophia announced her engagement to Trevor, a business consultant she had met through work. The wedding planning quickly became an exercise in extravagance. Each phone call brought news of another essential expense: a designer gown, a destination bachelorette, weekend, a reception venue that charged per hour what I earned in a week. Trevor and I are covering most of it, she assured me. But traditionally, the bride's family handles the flowers and rehearsal dinner. Those two items alone cost nearly $8,000, requiring me to dip into my modest retirement savings. When I gently suggested scaling back to something more affordable, Sophia responded with tears. "This is the only time I will get married, Mom. Do you want me to have a substandard wedding because you refuse to contribute what other mothers gladly provide?" The guilt was effective. I paid, telling myself this would be the last major expense. The wedding was beautiful, certainly, though I felt oddly out of place among the wealthy parents of Trevor's family and Sophia's sophisticated colleagues. Several guests expressed surprise upon meeting me. "Sophia never mentioned you were a nurse," one woman said, her tone suggesting she had expected someone more impressive. Retirement arrived for me at 62, not by choice, but necessity, as my back and knees could no longer handle 12-hour shifts. My pension and Social Security provided enough for my modest needs, but little cushion for emergencies or luxuries. I moved to a smaller apartment in a less desirable neighborhood to reduce expenses, a decision Sophia criticized during her increasingly rare visits. "This area seems unsafe, Mom. Could you not find somewhere better?" The question ignored the financial realities that she well understood but chose not to acknowledge. Meanwhile, she and Trevor purchased their first condo, a sleek downtown property featured in a local lifestyle magazine. The photo spread showed no evidence of family pictures or any acknowledgement of her past before Trevor. The photo album continued to grow wedding pictures taken from the back of the crowd, as I had not been included in the professional photography session. Copies of bank transfers when Sophia called in tears about an unexpected tax bill in her first year of marriage, a newspaper clipping about Meridian Marketing winning an industry award for a campaign Sophia had helped create. Also tucked within those pages, the most recent loan statement for the refinanced condo, still 15 years from being paid off. Medical bills from when I had postponed treatment for a growing health concern because Sophia needed help with the down payment on her car. Birthday cards I had sent that received no acknowledgement. It was a document not just of love, but of erasure. The systematic way in which my daughter had reconstructed her history, minimizing my role to that of a biological necessity rather than a present sacrificing parent. At 65, I joined a weekly bridge group at the community center, my first regular social activity in decades. When the other women spoke of their adult children and grandchildren with pride and occasional frustration, I found myself editing my own stories, embarrassed by the growing distance between Sophia's carefully constructed public image and the reality of our relationship. My daughter works in marketing in Chicago, I would say simply. She is very successful. It was easier than explaining the truth. The Sunday that changed everything began normally enough. I was preparing a simple brunch at my apartment. Nothing fancy, just French toast, fruit, and coffee. Sophia had called the previous day to say she would be stopping by during her business trip to Seattle. These visits had become so rare that, despite the short notice, I rearranged my whole weekend, canceling plans with my bridge group to clean the apartment and shop for her favorite breakfast foods. "What time should I expect you?" I had asked. "Around 10, she replied. And, I might bring a couple friends from the conference. They do not have plans tomorrow morning." I paused, calculating whether I had enough food and space for unexpected guests. "How many friends, honey?" "Just 2 or 3. Nothing formal, Mom. Do not go overboard." Of course, I went to the store immediately to buy additional groceries, stretching my monthly budget to include fresh berries, specialty coffee, and ingredients for a spinach quiche I could prepare alongside the French toast. I spent Saturday afternoon thoroughly cleaning, aware that Sophia had developed exacting standards about housekeeping that my arthritic hands did not always satisfy. When the doorbell rang at 10:30 on Sunday morning, I opened it to find not 2 or 3 friends, but Sophia plus 5 expensively dressed professionals, all carrying designer handbags and exuding a collective aura of importance that immediately made my modest apartment feel shabby. "Mom, these are my colleagues," Sophia said briskly, making rapid introductions I could barely follow. "Jennifer Alicia, Marcus Denise, and Paul." They filed in, glancing around with poorly concealed assessment. I caught Jennifer whispering something to Alicia while looking at my mismatched dining chairs. "What a quaint place," Marcus said with practiced politeness. "Very homey." Sophia winced almost imperceptibly. "Mom lives simply. She is a retired nurse," she added, as if this explained some deficiency. I busied myself in the kitchen, hastily rearranging my table settings to accommodate the additional guests. The quiche would now have to be cut into much smaller portions than planned. As I worked, I overheard snippets of conversation from the living room. "So, this is where Sophia grew up?" asked Denise. "Oh, no," Sophia laughed lightly. "This is a much newer place. My childhood home was quite different." The implication that we had lived somewhere better, rather than a succession of small apartments, until the modest condo stung. But I kept arranging food on plates, determined to be a gracious hostess. When we finally sat down to eat, the conversation revolved around the marketing conference they had attended, full of industry jargon and inside jokes that excluded me completely. I nodded and smiled, asking occasional questions that were answered briefly before the group returned to their shared professional world. The keynote was so inspiring, Alicia gushed. When she talked about overcoming obstacles and building herself up from nothing, I totally thought of you, Sophia. Sophia nodded, accepting this comparison with practiced humility. I have had my share of challenges, but that is what builds character, right? Absolutely, Paul agreed. Most people have no idea what it takes to get where we are. The sacrifices, the hustle. The conversation then turned to backgrounds and upbringings. Jennifer spoke about her father, a surgeon who had encouraged her educational pursuits. Marcus mentioned his parents' investment in his early entrepreneurial ventures. Each story emphasized family support, parental sacrifice, and foundations of privilege honestly acknowledged. Then attention shifted to Sophia. "Your rise is even more impressive," Denise said, "coming from such a different situation." Sophia hesitated, fork suspended above her plate. I waited, curious about how she would characterize our life together. "It was definitely challenging," she began, voice taking on a practiced, almost rehearsed quality I recognized from her professional presentations. My mom worked a lot, so I was pretty much on my own from an early age. I had to figure out homework, college applications, career planning, all the important stuff by myself. No guidance, no connections, just determination. The quiche turned to ash in my mouth. I looked at my daughter, wondering if she actually believed this revision of our history, or if she was consciously constructing a more dramatic narrative for her colleagues. "That must have been hard," Alicia sympathized. But clearly you thrived despite it all. Or because of it, Sophia countered. I learned self-reliance early. No one was going to create opportunities for me. If anything, I had to overcome active obstacles. I felt heat rising in my cheeks. Sophia helped herself in many ways, I interjected carefully. But there were certainly people supporting her journey. Her college education, for instance, was mostly covered by scholarships. Sophia interrupted smoothly. Academic merit opened doors for me. The partial truth hung in the air between us. Yes, she had received a scholarship, but it had covered less than half the cost of her expensive private education. The rest had come from my refinanced mortgage, extra nursing shifts, and depleted savings. Mothers always want to take credit, Sophia added with a laugh, that her colleagues joined. But honestly, I had to parent myself in a lot of ways. Emotional support was pretty minimal. Something shifted inside me then, a tectonic plate of maternal patience that had held steady through decades of small slights and growing revisions. The casual cruelty of her dismissal in front of strangers crossed a boundary I had not even known existed within me. "Is that really how you remember things, Sophia?" I asked quietly. The table fell silent. Sophia's expression hardened. "Mom, I am just being honest about my experiences. My upbringing shaped me in ways that were difficult, but ultimately made me stronger." "By upbringing, you mean the sacrifices I made to provide you with every opportunity I could." My voice remained calm, though my hands trembled slightly against the edge of the table. Sophia's eyes narrowed. "Let us not do this right now. Do what discuss reality." The words escaped before I could reconsider them. The tension in the room thickened. Her colleagues glanced uncomfortably at each other, suddenly very interested in their breakfast plates. "Reality is subjective," Sophia said with cool professionalism. "My experience growing up was one of emotional neglect while you worked constantly. I raised myself. I created my own opportunities." Each word felt like a physical blow. Decades of midnight fevers. I had tended school projects I had helped complete at exhausted dawn hours, countless encouraging notes in lunchboxes, college essays, reviewed and revised together, all erased in service of her preferred origin and story. I worked constantly to support you. I corrected my voice, finally breaking. Everything I did was for your benefit and future. Something snapped in Sophia then. The professional veneer cracked, revealing the teenager who had once slammed doors and hurled accusations when boundaries were set. "You made me this miserable person," she screamed, gesturing wildly. "Always working, never emotionally available. Do you know how damaged I am from having to be the adult while you were gone all the time? Do you know how it feels to raise yourself because your mother cares more about work than being present?" The room went completely still. Her friends stared at their plates, mortified witnesses to a family implosion they had never anticipated when accepting a brunch invitation. In that suspended moment, clarity washed over me. This narrative, this complete reinvention of our shared history, was not new. It had been building for years, growing stronger, with each retelling solidifying into a foundation myth that Sophia now believed herself. And I had enabled it with my silence, my acceptance, my unwillingness to challenge her increasingly distorted memories. Without a word, I stood and walked to the bookshelf in the corner of my living room. There, between novels and nursing reference books, sat a thick album bound in faded blue fabric. I removed it carefully, feeling its substantial weight in my hands, the weight of evidence of reality documented rather than reimagined. I returned to the table, and with deliberate calmness placed the album in front of Jennifer, who sat closest to Sophia. "Perhaps you would be interested in seeing another perspective," I said simply. Jennifer glanced uncertainly at Sophia before opening the album. The first page showed a much younger version of me in my nursing uniform, holding a newborn Sophia. Next to it, a pay stub from the hospital, with hours that totaled nearly 60 in 1 week. "Your mother worked all these hours with a newborn?" Jennifer asked, her voice soft with surprise. Sophia remained silent, arms crossed defensively across her chest. Jennifer turned the page. Photos of Sophia's early birthdays appeared not elaborate parties, but thoughtfully decorated celebrations with homemade cakes and carefully wrapped presents. One image showed a 3-year-old Sophia unwrapping a doll I had saved for months to afford. My handwritten note beneath read, "Worked double shifts for 6 weekends to buy this for my precious girl." "These are lovely memories," Alicia commented, leaning in to see better as Jennifer continued turning pages. The elementary school years unfolded in a documentary of ordinary maternal devotion, Sophia and me at science fairs, with projects clearly completed together, handmade Halloween costumes. I had stayed up nights to sew a certificate naming me Room Parent of the Year despite my grueling work schedule. Paul cleared his throat uncomfortably. "You were clearly involved in her school activities." When my shifts allowed, I explained quietly. I traded hours with other nurses constantly to attend important events. More pages turned, revealing the evidence of a middle-class upbringing without extravagance, but with consistent care. The small but comfortable apartments, we had shared holiday celebrations with modest but thoughtful gifts. Sophia's school awards with my proud comments written beside them. Then came the teenage section, handmade cards I had given Sophia that she had discarded, but I had retrieved and preserved. The 16 birthday scrapbook she had dismissed, so casually photographed page by page to document its existence. Notes from parent-teacher conferences I had attended despite working night shifts beforehand. "I remember that scrapbook," Sophia muttered. "It was just pictures." "It was 3 months of work during my lunch breaks, and after you went to sleep, I corrected gently. Every photo chosen specifically to celebrate a moment in your life." Marcus had joined the viewing now, his earlier polished detachment replaced by genuine interest. These show a lot of involvement and thought. The college years came next. Copies of application essays. I had helped edit late-night text exchanges about assignments. I had helped brainstorm care packages, documented with photos before shipping. And they're carefully preserved in plastic sleeves, the financial evidence Sophia had never acknowledged. Tuition statements showing the partial scholarship and the much larger parental contribution bank transfers depleting my savings account. The refinancing documents for the condo with my signature and the notary stamp. Denise gasped audibly. "You refinanced your home to pay for Preston. That is nearly $30,000 a year." $32,000 after the scholarship portion, I confirmed. It was important to Sophia, so I made it happen. Sophia shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "I did not ask you to do that." "You said your future depended on attending your dream school," I reminded her. "What was I supposed to do as your mother deny you that opportunity if I could find a way to provide it?" The wedding section came next. Receipts for the flowers and rehearsal dinner I had funded, alongside credit card statements showing the impact on my limited budget. Photos I had taken from the back of the venue, because I had not been included in the formal photography session. Thank you notes from other guests, but notably none from Sophia and Trevor. Finally, the most recent additions, documentation of ongoing financial support into Sophia's adulthood, the loan for her first car, down payment, monetary gifts, when she faced unexpected expenses, even the cost of this very brunch evidenced by yesterday's grocery receipt. As Jennifer closed the album, a heavy silence filled the dining room. Sophia stared at the wall behind me, refusing eye contact. Her colleagues exchanged glances, collective discomfort radiating from their expensive outfits. After what felt like an eternity, Alicia spoke. "Sophia, this does not match the story you have shared with us over the years." "People remember things differently," Sophia replied defensively. "That album is just my mother's perspective." "Receipts and bank statements are not perspectives," Marcus pointed out quietly. "Neither are loan documents." Jennifer looked directly at Sophia, her professional composure giving way to evident disappointment. "You told us you worked 3 jobs to put yourself through college, that you never had parental support for your education or career." "I did work in college," Sophia insisted. "Campus jobs." "For spending money," I added, "not for tuition or housing." Paul, who had remained largely silent throughout, suddenly stood up. His expression combined embarrassment with a determination that suggested a personal recognition in the dynamic playing out before him. "I think we should give Misty and Sophia some privacy," he said firmly. "This seems like a conversation that needs to happen between mother and daughter." But before anyone could move, Denise turned to Sophia with unexpected directness. "My mother was a single parent too," she said. "She worked cleaning houses while raising 3 kids. I would never dream of erasing her sacrifices from my story, even if parts of my childhood were difficult because of her absence. She cleaned those houses for us." She paused, then asked the question that had been building silently in the room: who raised Sophia? Sophia's face flushed deep red. She pushed her chair back abruptly, the legs screeching against the hardwood floor. "I need some air," she announced, and without another word walked out the front door of my apartment. The silence that followed held the weight of decades of unacknowledged sacrifices and convenient revisions. Her colleagues remained seated, seemingly uncertain about the proper protocol for witnessing such an intimate family collapse. "I am sorry you all had to see that," I finally said, beginning to clear plates with shaking hands. "This was not how I envisioned brunch going." "No, we are sorry," Jennifer replied, standing to help with the dishes. "We had no idea." "How could you?" I asked. "You only knew what Sophia told you." As they helped me clear the table in awkward solidarity, I wondered if this confrontation had been inevitable all along. The carefully constructed narrative Sophia had built could only stand as long as no one compared it to the documented reality of our shared past. The photo album remained open on the table, testimony to a history that could no longer be denied or rewritten, even by the most determined revisionist. Sophia did not return to the apartment that day. Her colleagues made uncomfortable goodbyes after helping clean up, each expressing some variation of apology for the situation. Jennifer lingered longest, helping me wash the last of the dishes. "I had a complicated relationship with my own mother," she confided as she dried a coffee cup. "But what you did for Sophia, I hope someday she appreciates it." After they left, the apartment felt cavernous in its silence. I returned the photo album to its shelf, wondering if I had done the right thing. Exposing family truths to strangers violated an unspoken code between mothers and daughters. But then, so did Sophia's wholesale reinvention of her upbringing. I tried calling her that evening, but the call went straight to voicemail. My text message, "We should talk about what happened," received no response. Days passed in silence. I returned to my quiet routine of bridge games, volunteer shifts at the community center, and managing my increasingly troublesome arthritis. A week after the brunch disaster, my younger sister Janet called from Portland. "Sophia contacted me," she opened without preamble. "She claims You humiliated her in front of important colleagues. What happened? I explained the brunch incident, trying to present both perspectives fairly despite the lingering hurt. Janet listened without interruption. That album was something else, wasn't it? She finally commented. I remember you working on it for years. It started as just memories, I admitted. But over time, as Sophia began rewriting our history, it became something more like evidence. That sounds terrible, doesn't it? What mother keeps evidence against her own child? One who knows her own truth is being erased, Janet replied simply. You were a good mother, Misty. Different from some, maybe. Working more than you wanted to. But good in all the ways that matter. Her words loosened something tight in my chest. I was so angry, Janet, not just about the brunch, but about years of feeling invisible in my own daughter's life story, of being cast as neglectful when every decision I made was centered around her needs. You are allowed to be angry, my sister assured me. The question is, what happens next? What happened next was unexpected. 2 days later, I received a message request on Facebook from Alicia, one of Sophia's colleagues from the brunch. I hope you don't mind me reaching out. Her message read, I wanted to check if you're doing okay after Sunday. That was a lot to handle with such grace. We exchanged a few messages, mostly pleasantries and reassurances. Then she wrote something that caught me off guard. Sophia has been different at the conference since that day. Quieter. She mentioned her mother a few times in conversations where it wasn't necessary, almost like she's trying to correct the record without directly addressing what happened. I wasn't sure how to feel about this information. Was it a hopeful sign or merely damage control on Sophia's part? I thanked Alicia for her kindness, but didn't press for more details about my daughter. As the weeks stretched into a month of silence from Sophia, my body began registering the emotional strain. The arthritis in my hands flared painfully, making even simple tasks like buttoning my cardigan challenging. I developed insomnia, replaying the brunch scene during long, dark hours. During a regular checkup, my doctor noted my elevated blood pressure with concern. Have you been under unusual stress lately? She asked, reviewing my chart. I hesitated before admitting I'm estranged from my daughter. Recently. She nodded with professional sympathy but genuine understanding. Family estrangements are particularly difficult on the body. We often don't realize how much stress we're carrying. She adjusted my blood pressure medication and suggested I consider talking to someone professionally. The following week, I found myself sitting in a community center meeting room with 7 other parents of estranged adult children. The support group called itself Healing Hearts, with a gentleness that almost made me turn around at the door. But desperation and loneliness propelled me to an empty chair in the circle. I'm Misty. I introduced myself when my turn came. My daughter has reconstructed her childhood in ways I don't recognize, and when I challenged her version, she stopped speaking to me. Nods of recognition circled the room. I wasn't alone in this particular pain. Gloria, a retired teacher in her 70s, reached over and patted my hand. My son hasn't spoken to me in 12 years, she shared. He believes I favored his sister, though I tried my best to love them equally. Others shared similar stories, children who blamed parents for divorces, for financial limitations, for imperfect responses to childhood crises. Parents who had apologized repeatedly for genuine mistakes, but found forgiveness withheld indefinitely. The hardest part, said Richard, a former accountant whose daughter had cut contact after he couldn't contribute to her destination wedding, is learning to live with the uncertainty. Will reconciliation ever happen? Should I keep trying or respect the distance? How do I find peace either way? Those questions resonated deeply. I had spent 6 decades defining myself primarily as Sophia's mother. Who was I in this new landscape where that role had been rejected? Gradually, I began building a life not centered around maternal identity or potential reconciliation. I joined a water aerobics class that helped with my arthritis. I volunteered more hours reading to children at the library. I accepted dinner invitations from my bridge group friends instead of keeping evenings open in case Sophia called. Janet visited from Portland, staying a week in my guest room. We looked through old family photos, including many of Sophia that weren't in the album. "Do you regret showing them the album?" she asked one evening as we sorted pictures on my coffee table. I considered the question carefully. "I regret that it was necessary," I finally answered. "But I don't regret standing up for my own reality." For decades, I've silently accepted Sophia's revisions to our history because challenging them seemed selfish, like I was demanding credit or gratitude. But that day at brunch, I realized it wasn't about credit, it was about truth. My life happened too, not just hers. My sacrifices were real, not just inconvenient footnotes to her success story. Janet nodded slowly. "That's growth, sis. Recognizing your life matters too." 2 months after the brunch incident, I received a text from an unknown number. It was Jennifer, Sophia's colleague, who had first looked through the album. "I hope it's okay to text you," she wrote. "I wanted you to know that what happened at your apartment changed something for me. I called my own mother that night. We've been estranged for years over much less significant issues than what Sophia has created with you. We're talking again now. Not perfectly, but talking. Thank you for showing what grace looks like in impossible circumstances." I sat on my balcony reading that message several times, watching the sunset paint Seattle's skyline in watercolor hues of orange and pink. Perhaps my relationship with Sophia couldn't be salvaged, but something meaningful had come from its unraveling. Something healing had reached beyond our broken mother-daughter bond to touch other wounded relationships. It wasn't the outcome I would have chosen, but it was an outcome I could find meaning in nonetheless. 3 months after the brunch that had exposed so many painful truths, I was arranging fresh flowers in my living room when a knock sounded at my door. I wasn't expecting visitors, and briefly considered ignoring it, assuming it might be someone selling something or distributing religious pamphlets. But something compelled me to answer. Perhaps it was the particular rhythm of the knock 3 soft taps rather than the usual confident rapping of a stranger. When I opened the door, Sophia stood in the hallway. She looked different, somehow less polished than usual. Her designer clothes had been replaced by jeans and a simple sweater. Her makeup was minimal and her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail rather than her typical professional style. "Mom," she said simply, "can I come in?" I stepped aside wordlessly, heart hammering against my ribs. She entered, glancing around the apartment, as if seeing it for the first time, or perhaps comparing it to her memory of the disastrous brunch. "Would you like some tea?" I offered, defaulting to hospitality, in the absence of knowing what else to say. "No, thank you." She perched on the edge of my sofa, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I should not stay long. I have a flight back to Chicago this evening." I sat in the armchair opposite her, waiting. This was her move to make. "I have been doing some thinking," she began carefully, "about what happened. About the album." I nodded, but remained silent. "Some of your pictures and documents. They didn't match my memories." Her voice carried no accusation now, just a quiet confusion. I remembered being alone a lot more. I remembered figuring things out by myself. "You were alone more than I wanted you to be," I acknowledged. "Working the hours I needed to support us meant sacrifices for both of us. But I was always thinking about you. always trying to be present when I could. She nodded slowly. Trevor and I have been seeing a counselor, together and separately. He suggested that sometimes when children experience pain or absence, they might construct protective narratives that help make sense of their feelings. This was more self-awareness than Sophia had demonstrated in years. I felt a glimmer of something like hope, though I tried to temper it with caution. "What does that mean for you?" I asked. She sighed, a sound heavy with the weight of difficult realizations. "It means I might have simplified things, made you more of a villain than you deserved, because it was easier than accepting the complicated reality that you did your best in difficult circumstances." The words weren't quite an apology, but they represented more acknowledgement than I had received in decades. "I'm not perfect, Sophia. I made plenty of mistakes raising you. There were times I was too tired to engage emotionally when you needed me. Times I prioritized providing financially over being present. Those are legitimate disappointments you can hold." "But I didn't just hold them," she admitted quietly. "I amplified them and erased everything else. The album showed a different story than the one I've been telling myself and others." We sat in silence for a moment, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across my living room floor. The blue photo album sat on its shelf across the room, a silent witness to our conversation. "Denise reached out to me," Sophia continued. "We had lunch last week when I was in Seattle for meetings. She told me about her mother, how she worked multiple jobs too, how she's built her success on acknowledging that foundation rather than denying it." I hadn't expected this development. That was kind of her. It wasn't kindness exactly, more like honesty I needed to hear. Sophia hesitated. She asked me a question I couldn't answer at first. She asked why it was so important for me to be seen as completely self-made, why I couldn't accept help as part of my story. The question hung in the air between us. I had wondered the same thing for years, but had never found the right moment or courage to ask it directly. "And what did you tell her?" I finally prompted. Sophia looked down at her hands. That maybe it was easier to believe I did it all myself than to acknowledge how much I'd received. Because if I received that much and still struggled sometimes with relationships, with anxiety, with never feeling quite good enough, then what did that say about me? The insight struck me with its simple truth. Sophia's rewriting of history hadn't been solely about erasing me. It had been about creating a narrative where her adult struggles made sense to her. "Accepting help doesn't diminish your achievements," I said gently. "No one succeeds completely alone. I know that intellectually." She gave a small, sad smile. "Living it is harder." I didn't rush to reassure her or to press for a fuller apology. Some recognitions needed to unfold at their own pace. Some reconciliations couldn't be forced into neat Hollywood endings. "So where does this leave us?" I asked instead. Sophia looked directly at me then, her eyes so like my own, clear and unguarded for the first time in years. "I don't know exactly. I'm still working through things with my therapist, but I'd like to try for something more honest between us. Not erasing the difficult parts, but not erasing the good parts either. It wasn't everything, but it was something, a beginning rather than an ending." "I'd like that too," I replied. As she prepared to leave for her flight, Sophia paused by the bookshelf where the photo album Saturday. She didn't open it, but ran her fingers lightly along its spine. "Would you mind if I borrowed this sometime? There might be parts of my history I need to remember more clearly." "It's always been partly yours," I told her. "Take it whenever you're ready." After she left, I sat alone in my apartment processing what had occurred. The conversation hadn't resolved everything, Decades of misunderstandings and revised history couldn't be corrected in a single afternoon. But something fundamental had shifted, like the first small movement of tectonic plates that eventually reshape entire landscapes. In the months that followed, our relationship entered a new phase. Not the close mother-daughter bond some of my friends enjoyed with their adult children, but not the complete estrangement of before either. Sophia called more regularly. Our conversations remained somewhat careful, but increasingly included genuine questions about each other's lives. At 70, I celebrated my birthday with a small gathering at Janet's house in Portland. Sophia sent flowers and called that evening, asking detailed questions about the celebration. She listened when I described my water aerobics friends and the volunteer reading program I had recently expanded at the library. For my part, I learned to hold boundaries even as our relationship improved. I declined to contribute to a home renovation project she and Trevor planned gently, explaining that my retirement budget didn't allow for such expenses. To my surprise, she accepted this limitation without argument. The photo album remained on my shelf, neither hidden away nor prominently displayed. Its purpose had evolved from secret repository to acknowledged record a documentation of a shared history that could be referenced when memory failed or narratives diverged too sharply from reality. Through my continued participation in the Healing Hearts support group, I gained perspective that helped me navigate this new territory with Sophia. I learned that parental love doesn't require martyrdom, that healthy relationships with adult children include mutual respect rather than constant sacrifice. As Gloria from the group wisely told me, unconditional love doesn't mean unlimited tolerance for being erased or mistreated. It means you'll always be open to genuine connection based on truth. Perhaps the most profound lesson came from accepting that some questions may never be fully answered, some wounds never completely healed. The narrative Sophia created about her upbringing served purposes in her life that I might never fully understand. My challenge was not to eradicate her perspective, but to stand firmly in the reality of my own experience alongside it. The truth exists in the space between our memories, hers of feeling unseen despite my efforts, mine of giving everything, despite her perception of absence, both containing elements of validity, neither encompassing the complete reality of those shared years. What remains when the stories are stripped of their embellishments and protective layers is simply this: I loved my daughter the best way I knew how, within the constraints of my circumstances. That love was imperfect, but persistent practical, rather than performative, expressed through actions that created opportunities, rather than words that created comfort. Whether that love is enough, whether it can be recognized and valued for what it was, rather than criticized for what it wasn't, is a question that remains partially unanswered. But I found peace in knowing I never abandoned my responsibilities as a mother, even when doing so might have been easier. I showed up day after day, year after year, creating a foundation from which my daughter could launch her life, even if she prefers not to acknowledge the blueprint. And in that knowledge I have found a measure of serenity that doesn't depend on Sophia's validation or anyone else's approval. As I look back on our journey now, I wonder about other parents and children navigating their own complicated truths. Have you ever had to stand up for your version of events when someone rewrote your shared history? How did you balance honoring your own reality while still maintaining important relationships? I would love to hear your experiences in the pond, the pros and comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to hear more reflections on family truth and the complicated business of loving imperfectly but persistently. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes the greatest act of love is simply bearing witness to the truth, both others and your own.